Well, first of all, this all happened when I was in ninth grade. I had matured early, so I received a lot of gross comments in 7th to ninth grade. This made me lose confidence in myself. So instead of being very sociable and outgoing like I used to be, I was shy and awkward. I had zero friends. Literally zero. So teachers often came up to me and asked me if I was lonely and just showed interest in me because I seemed depressed or whatever. My English teacher's name was Mr. Z. He had the creepiest blue eyes, and his smile was even creepier. On the first day of school, he asked us about ourselves, what our favorite subject was, our names. But he always called on me, even though I never raised my hand. When he asked me, I would speak quietly because everyone stared at me and it made him laugh. He used to call me my name, Goodheart. Towards the middle of the year, I noticed that he showed me a lot of favoritism. If he took away our privileges to go to the bathroom, he would say something like, "Take this to the office," and then whisper, "Go to the restroom if you have to." When we received our progress reports, I would have A's on assignments I had never done. I never told anyone about that because English was a class I had to pass in order to graduate. As the school year went on, I started to realize that he never looked me in the eyes. He would stare at my chest, then my legs, at the floor, etc. But when he did look at me, he barely blinked, which made me look away instead. It was very awkward. When I first noticed him blatantly staring at my chest, I didn't think much of it at the time because I'm not very blessed in the chest, so guys usually look at my butt instead. I just figured there was something on my shirt. The first few times. Towards the end of the year, he started asking me to come to his room during lunch, so I could help him grade. When I came to his room, he'd have a movie on and we'd watch that for my lunch. He didn't have to teach a class after, so he let me skip my class afterwards. One thing I noticed right away was that there was sex scenes in every movie we watched. He'd ask me if I wanted to skip, and I'd shrug because I wanted to act mature. It started to happen every day. We'd watch a movie every day, which all had very awkward sex scenes. At the end of the school year, we watched our last movie, and this time the scene was very long and very detailed and very awkward. He put his hand on my leg gently and laughed. "It'll be over soon." He kept his hand on my leg for the whole thing. Luckily, when the bell rang, I left. I didn't say bye, I just left. The reason why I wrote this is because I saw him at Petco, my job, a week ago. I didn't think he'd recognize me. I wear glasses now, dyed my hair blonde, and lost a little weight. I was helping one line of people, which had about 5 people in it, and my coworker was working with a line that had 2. He stood in my line and waited for everyone to finish, even though the other line was empty. When I took his things, avoiding eye contact the whole time, he stared at me. I didn't look up because I didn't want to meet his gaze. Towards the end of the transaction, he started asking me about my life. Did I like my job, how my family was doing, etc. I just gave him short, simple answers, while he drilled a hole into my face with his eyes. After we were finished, he smiled and said, "I'll be back again, Goodheart." After freshman year, he was no longer a teacher at my school. I never found out why. This happened with my music teacher when I was in the 5th grade. He was new, filling in for a few months for my normal music teacher, who had just had surgery. He was a lot older, a very big, fat guy who was always sweaty, and he had fidgety hands and shifty eyes. He was very creepy. So anyways, in 5th grade, I was already developing and all that good stuff. I also admired my older sister and wanted to be like her. She would wear these tiny midi skirts and I was dying to get some. Well, my mom wasn't having any of that. She didn't even want her grown daughter wearing them. She bought me these things called skirts. They were short skirts, but had shorts sewn into them on the inside, so if anyone ever looked up your skirt or anything, they wouldn't get a peep at the goods. So anyways, he shows up and creeps me out right off the bat. He's nice enough, he just has this super creepy vibe. He's also really shifty and fidgety. He almost seems nervous to be around children, just really weird overall. Then the comments started. He would harass me about my skirts. He said they were too short. I told him they had shorts made into them. He told me he knew I was lying, and I'm pretty sure he basically admitted to me that he had looked up my skirt on numerous occasions. He also told me he could see right through me. This went on every day, creepy comments about my clothes, and him staring holes in me. He would also single me out to answer weird questions or call me out on something. As far as I know, he didn't treat any other students this way. I ended up telling my mom, who is a serious mama bear. She went to my principal and they arranged a meeting between my principal and vice principal, the creepy teacher in question, and my mom and dad. My mom is very short and thin, but my dad is like 6'2" and 250 pounds of muscle. He is also very protective of me. So I'm not entirely sure what happened at the meeting, but I do know my dad never said a word to the man, just stared at him the whole time like, I know you creeped on my daughter and I am not afraid to hurt you. My mom also went off on him. She really let him have it. He kept changing his story. I don't think he knew it was being recorded. They ended up playing the recording back and catching him in several lies. He was immediately terminated. Super creepy, possibly pedo teacher. Let's not meet again. I don't know if this was a universal thing, but when I was in middle school, there was a few substitute teachers that would make their rounds when teachers were absent. We knew all the subs pretty well, which were serious and which would let us play MASH and read magazines and talk all period. On the off chance we had a new sub, the boys would always test them to see what they could get away with. You know, like drumming on their desks with their pencils or tossing airplanes across the room to their friends. Halfway across the class's 7th grade year, we got this new sub in our history class. Mrs. Palmer was out for a few days on sick leave, and in her place was a middle-aged black man. I don't remember what we had been studying at the time, but I do remember that Mrs. Palmer had left us a lot of busy work that I'm sure we got A's on just for doing. Mrs. Palmer was infamous for punishing her classes with extra homework for behaving badly when a sub was there. So no matter who our sub was, we always made sure to do our work. I do remember that this man was very quiet. He didn't say much other than telling us to make a line and come pick up the worksheets Mrs. Palmer left us on her desk. He never told us our name or tried to engage us like some older subs did. He also didn't play on his phone or read like the younger subs would. He just sat quietly and watched over us. As far as sub experiences go, it was pretty normal. If awkwardly quiet, few days. We would come in, do our work, whisper quietly, and when the bell would ring, we moved on to the next class. I really don't remember him talking much at all except for when one student asked him a question. "What's that noise?" they asked. "It's the air conditioner. It's on the fritz. They're supposed to fix it this weekend, I think," our sub answered. At the time, I thought nothing of it. It made sense to us. We didn't question it. However, soon after my mother asked me about him, she asked if we had him as a sub. And at first I had no clue who she could be talking about, because I'd never known his name. When it was obvious that I was confused, she described him to me. "Oh yeah, he was our sub. Why, did you go to school with him or something?" I have older parents, so this wasn't much of a stretch. "No," she said. "But did you notice anything weird about him?" I told my mom that he was just quiet. She said that when the background check came back to the school, It reported that he had sex offender charges for sexually assaulting a minor. When she asked again if I was sure there was nothing weird about him or if he talked to us about weird things, I told her the only thing he really said was about the air conditioner making a clicking noise. As it turns out, it wasn't the air conditioner. He had been very stealthily taking photos of us the entire time he subbed. First off, I'll start by saying I'm a guy, and part of this happened secondhand via a female student I knew well. When I was in grade 6, we had a split grade/7 class at my middle school. One of the grade 7 students, a tall red-haired girl, was quite physically mature for her age. She was constantly harassed by other guys in the class, to the point of having her handbag stolen in the schoolyard, so people could see her running in a short pink skirt. But we were all the same age at least. On the other hand, early on in the school year, our big hulking gym teacher, probably of Greek or Balkan origins, started acting funny around the redhead. He would always conveniently call on her for demonstrations and physically help her with the technique. This happened with no other students. Nothing untoward at all, and it happened in front of the whole class. But it was odd. If he needed a guy, unfortunately it was me and one other guy, but thankfully he wouldn't move our arms or legs to show us the proper push-up position or anything like that. This went on all year, until around March, when he burst in on us boys in the changing room. We all looked pissed, but there's nothing we can do. He has some bullshit pretext, saying somebody took something and he'd find the thief, if I recall correctly. After he leaves us, we all start singing, "Mr. Blank is a perv, Mr. Blank is a perv." Students could probably hear it all the way to the cafeteria, which was right behind. The gym teacher, who could certainly hear from his office, storms back in. "Stop that right now or I'm getting the principal." We actually stop more or less, except a few mutters, but a few minutes later, the principal walks in, stares at each and every one of us, and starts shouting us down. "Which one of you is the thief? I'll have you expelled. And you're all protecting him, and now you're spreading rumors about Mr. Blank? Any more of this, and you're all coming to the principal's office. I mean it." Maybe it was okay for Mr. Blank to enter the male change room, but we all thought he was creepy, especially those of us who had hots for the redhead. Maybe we're just being paranoid? 2 days later, I get pulled aside, literally, I think from indoor soccer, and told to find the redhead, not her real name obviously, and tell her to come to his office. That's odd, I think to myself. She's like 50 feet away playing on the girl's side of the gym. Go find her yourself. Like I said, this guy is creepy as hell. Nevertheless, I can't do anything, so I go to tell her that he wants to see her in his office. She looks as scared as I am, and I go back to playing soccer, not forgetting the incident. Apparently, he had asked her if she wanted anything from the teacher's lounge. No, she said. He leaves, saying he's just getting coffee for himself and a couple donuts, just in case she changes her mind. When he comes back, he tells her he's been noticing her squats were poor, and asking to practice right there with him. Their conversation goes something like this. "My team needs me, they're down a person." "Forget about them. We're talking about you." "Here, try it. Let me show you." "But..." "Do it." The creepy gym teacher then proceeds to walk behind her and grab her waist, looking down her blouse from behind her. "Am I making you uncomfortable?" She bolts and leaves the office in a rush, tears streaming down her eyes. She goes to the change room early that day, and since PE is the last course of the day, I don't see her until the following morning. The next day, while he's in his office, he was usually in his office doing nothing and not supervising. And while we're supposed to be doing a few laps around the gym, She jogs up to me and a few other male students. She tells us everything. That afternoon after class, the boys' change room, most of us had the hots for her, started screaming at the top of our lungs. "Who's a fucking perv? Mr. Blank is." Somehow the administrators didn't hear us, and the next 2 years I was there, as far as I know, nobody ever reported this guy. It must have shocked him to hear kids this young cursing, let alone cursing that loud. At any rate, he wasn't fired during my tenure there. What happened to the girl? Well, thankfully, he no longer called on her to demonstrate techniques for the rest of the year. He probably got the message through the walls of the boys' change room. Her final year there, she had a different PE teacher. I sadly lost contact with her after middle school. Thankfully, she did the smart thing and got out of that man's office before things really got out of hand. I'm worried something worse would have happened.